there seems to be a real loss of meaning, more fear and anxiety, people identifying themselves with depression, and then turning to psychiatric drugs or other external means to try to kind of numb or detach from that experience. And what I'm probably most known for is being very outspoken about two things: the labeling of them as illness, as if there's some material medical condition and it's separating us from the role that emotions play as powerful energy, as informing us that there's things in our lives that we have to face and overcome. I kind of see that as very dark and very evil, to disconnect people from that and just label it with a condition. As well as the continued normalization of this as a disease and pushing more and more people to pharmaceuticals. I want to just kind of get your sense on maybe how you conceptualize and think about the trials, tribulations, and challenges that we'll go through, and then what we end up labeling as mental illness.
Well, I think for one thing, I often say that some of the worst aspects of our current world are a direct result of a false sense of separation that's inherent in materialist thinking. So you think about the materialist science, reductive materialism. You break something down into all its little parts, break it down into electrons, protons, quarks, photons, etc. And then you understand the physical laws that govern those things, and you can understand how all of reality emerges. That's kind of the conventional approach. And it really doesn't work. And it's that false sense of separation that I think gets us so much into trouble. And especially when you combine that with a misinterpretation of Darwinian evolution that focused too much on competition and not collaboration and cooperation between members of a species and also between various species. Just saw a beautiful YouTube video this morning of an elephant that was lifting a gazelle out of a raging river. So you get, and I saw one a few days ago of dolphins serving as midwives for whale birthing. So you have this incredible, beautiful sense of animal and the animal kingdom in the natural world, of basically sentient beings helping other sentient beings, even when we don't necessarily expect it. And the reality is that is, to me, a huge part of the benefit that I see coming in the form of this revolution in thinking about the brain-mind relationship and the nature of consciousness and the nature of the spiritual. And so ultimately, I feel that as we begin to focus much more on relationships with each other, what we're here to share and do together, which is what you find, for example, in the near-death experience literature, an incredible focus on love and kindness, on the emotions of our connections with others, on the fact that unconditional love is really the best answer at any time. It's what what we reflect out to, what we project out to the world at large, is what the universe then gives us back. So the more we can move away from that false sense of materialistic separation and more into an acknowledgement of the one mind and how we're all sharing that one mind, we're all in this together, we're here to help each other, and start focusing more on relationships, I think you'll find that a lot of that kind of dysfunction and kind of trauma in our world today will slowly start to dissipate, because we'll help people by bringing them back into a much more natural mode of operation, which acknowledges the importance of loving and caring for others. To me, spending my life as a doctor, as a physician, I know the benefit that come to me as a person from helping others. If they're in deep trouble, the more I can do to help them, the better. That's why I loved having a very advanced neurosurgical training, so I could take people with very advanced diseases like malignant brain tumors and aneurysms, things like that, and try and restore them to a very wholesome and healing life. But ultimately, I think that for each and every one of us, coming into this wholeness involves a kind of a shift that views our ability to serve as helpers, to be here to help others, and to seek out those in need, and to try and help the least, the last, and the lost. And that ultimately, getting away from this egocentric, narcissistic self-focus can be very healing. There's something very therapeutic about helping other beings, not just human beings, but our animal friends, etc. And the more we can do to make other lives better, I think it ultimately makes our lives better too. And I agree with you in many ways. I've especially kind of recoiled against, I remember when I was training as a medical student back in, the 70s, 80s, that kind of thing, and thinking that some of those psychiatric drugs, the SNRIs, SSRIs, et cetera, I saw them as having great benefit. But over time, I also realized there were side effects. And then I started realizing people were being put on them. And then these arguments from the pharmaceutical company about, well, if that's not working, we've got this that you can add to it, this and that. But ultimately, to me, it seemed kind of foolish because I think they were kind of missing the target. And I'm much more of a fan of meditation. I believe we have the ability to bring healing and wholeness to ourselves in very powerful ways. Um, and remember also that the ego is right there at the source of so many addictions. Addictions, not just alcoholism and drug addiction, but addictions to work, addiction to exercise, addiction to sex, addiction to love. I mean, we can be addicted to a lot of things. And that, in most cases, is that ego mind trying to convince us through the tools of fear and anxiety that, these are things we need. And that's why I think meditation, centering prayer, which for me is kind of the same thing. These are all ways of getting into mind, into that realm of the mental. And that's where we have far more influence. And so for me, when I meditate, that little ego voice of Eben Alexander is right there at the entry saying, I want to know this or that, or makes a certain observation. But then when I start writing those sacred acoustics tones, that ego voice just goes into timeout. And that's a very important step in meditation, is to take the voice in your head. I love how Michael Singer in his book, The Untethered Soul, he calls the voice in your head your annoying roommate. And that's a very good way to put it, because what I would suggest is each and every one of us as a higher soul has access to far richer kind of ingredients coming into growth and coming into wholeness. But they involve an acknowledgement of the oneness of mind, and that we're all really here to serve and help each other. And the more we can kind of shift that focus and move away from the kind of egocentrism and narcissism that's right at the heart of drug and alcohol and other addictions, I think we start to move in a very healthy and wholesome and healing territory. So from my perspective, meditation, centering prayer, and for anybody out there who needs a tool, what I use is sacred acoustics, a form of binaural beat brainwave entrainment. You can go to sacredacoustics.com to learn more. And I'll also put out there that there is a peer-reviewed pilot study of sacred acoustics tones in the treatment of anxiety. It was published by Dr. Anna Yusim. She's a Manhattan psychiatrist, and she found in her study of sacred acoustics that over a 2-week listening period, she had a 26% reduction of anxiety symptoms in her patient population versus only a 7% reduction in the control group that got standard talk therapy for anxiety over those 2 weeks. So to get a 26% reduction just by listening to sacred acoustics tones through headphones, that's pretty amazing. And what I will tell you is, given my kind of understanding of how sacred acoustics works, basically by going down to the lower brainstem to a circuit that arose more than 300 million years ago, and by oscillating, left-right oscillation in that low brainstem circuit, you're doing something even more powerful, but similar to what you do in EMDR. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which involves oscillations in the midbrain to move the eyes left and right. Well, here we're going to an even more primitive level using sounds to oscillate the lower brainstem. And that's where I think this real power is coming from. But I've learned to use differential frequency brainwave entrainment as a very effective tool in recovering memories of my NDE and cultivating relationships with the various guides and kind of the wisdom, the God force of the NDE, et cetera. I mean, to me, meditation is a very powerful tool to help people kind of align with their higher soul and kind of move beyond the impediments of the ego and the ego mind.